How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about corrections or compassion. I got a quick little message from one of my viewers. She says, I know the largest part of your podcast is focused on prisons and jails for adults. I work in a large county jail, and for the first time while in booking, we had a 12-year-old male juvie that came to our jail for fingerprinting and processing before transported to juvie hall. The charges of this 12-year-old was sex abuse, second degree, and this was his second time receiving this charge, and the victim was 8 years old. For the first time, I was awestruck and unable to even speak to the kid. I did not know all the details. I couldn't process how this happened. Where were his parents? I mean, most of the time when a juvie comes to be processed, I can talk to them, asking how old they were, what they want to be when they grow up, and suggesting to the juvie so they don't make it a habit and succeed in life. But with this kid, I couldn't even do that. And I'm a parent, and this one hit home. Then she later says, I truly appreciate your channel. I like how you share stories, helping others set their mind at ease, knowing we're not alone in this career. 6 years of working in a jail, and I try to always set my mind to put my 2 cents in to hopefully try to save one soul a year. Out of those years, only 2 that I know of who have reached out and told me how well they're doing because of conversations shared for when they were released or go to treatment. I haven't had a situation like this leave me without words. On a higher note, when new officers are training, I have them read your books on inmate manipulation and review some podcasts to help them and in preparation to handle the inmates. All right, so I got Joe on my show. Today we're going to talk about those boundaries, and this is a purposeful profession. I want people to realize that working in corrections at any level is a purposeful profession, because you are going to interact with people and you are going to have a chance to create a positive impact. But at that point, we also have to realize that there are boundaries, and we can't let ourselves be overwhelmed with outcomes that we cannot control. Now, before I bring Joe on, I want to read something that comes from this book right here that I wrote, How to Succeed in Corrections. And if you guys have this book, you're going to want to go to chapter 45. And this is kind of going to be quickly the balance of our discussion. It's called, Remember, Correctional Staff Work for the Agency, Not the Inmate. I'm also going to make it more personal when we do the show with Joe, but I want to read something. So the first thing I got is a quote from Russ that says, be invested professionally, not personally. There's nothing wrong with pride and ego, but if it stems from personal investment rooted in a personal relationship, you can be manipulated, co-opted, or corrupted. Stay in your prescribed role as an officer or professional staff, not a friend, acquaintance, or peer. I want to read my thought real quick. As defined by their prescribed role, correctional staff must remain within their trusted boundaries when dealing with the inmate population. Staff must keep in mind that the best way to help an inmate is through the policies and procedures of the agency that governs their work. There are many inmates who will look to switch staff's priorities. These inmates will make many attempts to get staff to change how they view their obligations, and more importantly, they try to change who staff may feel they are directly obligated to. Correctional staff serving in a helping role must never get so blinded by the need or want to help an inmate that they forget, even for a moment, their prescribed role as defined by the agency. And that's why I think the young lady also mentioned that she reads my manipulation books, because sometimes when you're in a custody role and you want to say that you want to help someone, the problem is we may also feel that we have to quickly balance that out by saying, but we don't want to be, we're not looking to be manipulated, you know, and I get that. I mean, and we have books on that, but that doesn't negate the fact that we are in a helping role. So it's how do we balance that? I remember an inmate telling one of our counselors that she worked for him, the inmate, when she refused to make a phone call to the IRS on his behalf. In her wisdom, she was quick to reply, let me tell you one thing. I don't work for you. I work for the state. And unless the order comes from them to make the call ain't happening, at least not from me. Whatever game the inmate was trying to play, whatever power he believed he had over her and her position was nullified immediately. Wrap-up thought for that was, for those who are hired to advocate or assist inmates, social services, medical staff, education, religious services, mental health counselors, etc., remember this: you are paid and trusted to do your job. It happens with custody as well. Let the job define the parameters of the help afforded to the inmates in your charge. If staff go in with the mindset of strictly helping the inmates in their charge with no restrictions and what they can and can't do, or on how they help or how that help is to be carried out and delivered, lines will be crossed. Staff will become more focused on the personal needs and want of the inmates and not on the work that the agency trusts and expects them to do. When that occurs, boundaries will be crossed and jobs will be lost. I just want to get that part out there because that relates to that manipulation aspect that's on the back end of what our comment is. But with that said, me and Joe are going to address this on a personal level, which basically you have a young lady who feels purpose in what she does, and now this incident occurs, and she kind of just doesn't know how to react to that. And I think that's the bulk of our discussion today. I just wanted to get that part out there. And by the way, guys, as custody, we still play that role because we are going to be seen as role models. So the chance to create an impact in a negative environment can be very powerful. And I know a lot of us may think, well, Ganji, that's not our role. It is your role. Let's be honest. It is your role. So when you go to create an impact, of course you have the universal precaution, but the universal precaution doesn't stop you from interacting with the inmates. It just be wary, be careful. But when there's a chance to create an impact, we should. Now let me get Joe on. What's up, Joe?
Hey, morning, brother. How are you?
Good, Joe. Do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Corrections and currently serving as assistant jail administrator in our local sheriff's department in the jail division and a panel member here for Chair Talk.
Yes, and we love having you. And it's crazy, Joe. Even I fall back on my own books once in a while. But, Joe, this is an important topic because I love when you have someone from a custody background who's willing to come up with, express some level of vulnerability. But in the process, I think what I understood from this was you have a young woman who has purpose. And this is why she chose this profession. And that's a great thing, guys, because we want purpose-driven people in this profession because believe it or not, guys, if you have a strong purpose and you connect that with integrity, you don't move, which is a great thing. Inmates can't sway you. They can't because purpose connected with integrity, it's a powerful tool because it's self-motivating, but it still rocks within the guidelines of what the agency expects. But Joe, when you read something like this, I mean, this kind of shows you how far corrections has evolved.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We've gone from our straight line authoritative roles to actually, in this officer's case, trying to find purpose into why things are happening in this child's life. And, almost to the point where she actually halfway feels guilty for the kid because she doesn't know anything about his home life or what's going on there. But unfortunately, regardless of his age, because of his charge, we still have a job to do. We have to do it. It's not a pleasant one because, chances are this 12-year-old doesn't even understand what's taking place at this point in time.
Yeah, and I want to mention something because there may be people on the outside that's saying that this person is too involved. I'm going to disagree to some extent. Here why. I mean, yes, we have to be objective. I get it. But I think here's the thing. There's a difference between help and save. I want people to realize that. Like, when you have someone coming in and when they come into this profession, I believe there is a motivation to help and we want those people. But sometimes that motivation can shift from help to save. And there's a difference there because help, it's sort of like a developed partnership, but ultimately the person you're helping is in charge of the outcome. You're in charge of your effort. The save part is a bit more extreme. That means that you're taking onus of both the effort and the outcome. And that to me is when you're providing too much. Your job is always within the defined role to provide help. And yes, you want people connected to it. You want people that are passionate to provide that help because this is a tough environment and it's a struggle. So you don't want people that are going to quit the moment there's their first challenge. But having said that, to look at the extremes, save and not to save, and this is how you kind of look at the world you work in. That's the wrong way to look at it. In the middle, it's help, and that's it. There's no save or not to save because you're going to find people that don't want to be saved. And I'm going to be a little harsh here. You're going to find people that may not deserve to be saved. But with that said, because the agency puts us in a prescribed role, they're all deserving of our help. Now, I think when it comes to this, and I'm sure Joe would agree, is you're not in charge of the outcome when you see that you're there to help. You are totally in charge of the effort. And my concern is when you have people that come into this profession that are purpose driven, that want to help. My biggest concern is that they shift from helping to want to save. And then the problem is when they realize that, this ain't working the way I expect it because the outcome is something that they cannot manage. But with that said, they still feel that, they're responsible for it. Then it erodes on their efforts to help. Because now it's like, well, this person's not worth saving. Okay, but that's not your job to save them. So the last thing you want is for someone to come in this profession and, make the effort to help, which is the right thing to do. But then eventually, they get too involved and they push to wanting to save the individual. And then they wind up realizing that, man, I don't know, I can't do nothing with this individual. Yeah, but you're not in charge of the outcome. But now the problem is they get so invested in the outcome that they don't realize that it's really about their effort. So you don't want to lose your investment in the outcome when technically we just want your investment in the effort. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, we always instruct our people to try to help within your prescribed role. There's always things that you can do as a correctional officer or a supervisor within your prescribed role to help an inmate, with his transition from going from the street, being incarcerated, especially if it's his first time. There are things you can do to help. Unfortunately, because they're there, you can't save them. It's ultimately their job to save themselves. There's, when you transition from help to save, it's gone a little bit too far because now you're overly invested in this individual, and even, it's hard enough to see a kid come in, especially the age of 12. We don't know much about the background on this charge. So, we don't know. I mean, it could be anything from, innocent as a groping charge, all the way up to, an actual sexual crime. We don't know much about the background on this, and it makes it hard because when you see a 12-year-old come in, and I understand completely where this officer's coming from, because, when I see a 12-year-old come into my facility, first question is, why is he here? What the hell could he have possibly done to get himself brought to jail on a sex abuse charge? Unfortunately, in these times that, we are with technology, things are so easy to be sent digitally or electronically that can get these kids in trouble. And, they really don't realize it. But nevertheless, because of the fact that they're brought into the facility, given that they're 12-year-olds or not, we still have a job to do. It's okay to feel bad for the kid that he's there. But, to go as far as, it's kind of hard to explain it. To go as far as attempting to try to think that you can save this kid from this charge or save this kid from any future endeavors. That part's really not our job. We want to play the authoritative role, and sometimes you have to play the parental role, in order to get some sort of understanding with the inmate, regarding certain situations. But like I said, it's perfectly fine to try to help within our prescribed roles, especially for first time, offenders or, first time arrestees or detainees. We can do everything that we can within our prescribed role, to help this kid, whether it's, after the booking procedure, if he's sent to juvie, give him that extra phone call to mom and dad to get him some reassurance that, he's going to be okay in the end, or something of that nature. But, to go as far as to climbing into this kid's background, his family life, his home life, thinking that you yourself are going to be able to save them. It's kind of that's a tough choice. It's kind of almost a personal boundary that's been crossed. It's hard to stay, like I said, it's hard to stay within that prescribed role because of the fact the kid's 12. Nobody wants to see a 12-year-old go to jail. Your 12-year-old, my 12-year-old, anybody's 12-year-old, it's a kid. But, Nevertheless, you still have to understand the fact that he's there in your facility, in your jail, in your booking department to be fingerprinted, to be sent to juvie. It's okay to be shocked. Just when you think you've seen it every day, another day comes and you see something different. It's okay to be shocked, but we still have to remember we still have a job to do.
Yeah, and I like what you said, Joe. I think, if 12-year-old comes in, the parents are there could be some chance where there's going to be an interaction. Of course, you're going to, I love interactions. I embrace interactions. But I think there's an intentional effort on this young woman's part to, go into the family history and all this other stuff. And at the end of the day, I think that's where now you have to take a step back from, because I think there's a part where, like you said before too, is, there's the effort to help, but it still is an outward approach. When you start looking to save, it's inward. That means you're taking on the responsibility of the outcome, which requires you to now push, or it motivates you to now push on all these extra things that I would not do. And Joe had suggested he wouldn't do. Like as I said, I mean, if the parents are there and there's a chance interaction, I'm not going to be rude. I'm going to interact. I'm going to say what my thoughts are as a professional, but I'm not responsible for anything after me speaking my mind. It's just, it is what it is. I had this interaction and I move forward with my day. If the child comes back into the system later on, I'm not going to go back and question, well, could I have said more when I was with the parents? No, you're taking the responsibility on. That's not really yours to take. So, and I know there, and by the way, this does sit on these extremes, because you got some people that may watch that would say that, it's not in our role entirety. It's not in the role at all. So basically, not even to have that chance interaction. And I'm going to disagree with that. I do agree with the fact that you could be going a little bit too far with checking out family history and all this other stuff. I agree that's a little too far. But you're going to have interactions. You're in a position that really is a trusted position. So you could have an impact. I mean, think about that, guys. I mean, not only you have an interaction with the child, but if the parents are coming in and there's a chance you can have that interaction, you're seen in a position of authority. So you could have a tremendous impact, because some people may just trust in the position of authority that allows for that dialogue to happen. I mean, you could be talking to the parents quickly about, well, maybe your son could be doing this, whatever it is, but ultimately it's your responsibility. But they're going to listen to you because you're in a position of authority. I think the problem here is that you don't know when to let go. So, and guys, I know there are going to be some people that are watching this again that is going to say, well, you're going too far with just having that interaction. And I got to disagree. I mean, we are community leaders. People may come up to us and ask for advice. So you could have a family that comes up and goes to, myself or Joe and says, I don't know what to do with this child anymore. And, maybe it's okay to say, well, you know what, listen, I've seen this happen before. This is the advice I would give. Ultimately, it's for you to take it. But, maybe you could try these routes. But at the end of the day, once I give the advice, they're responsible for the outcome. But I do feel that those interactions, Joe, some people are going to believe that even just the initial interactions is too much. And I disagree. I believe that you play some role in some level of direction. But again, you're not responsible technically if they get to the destination.
No, I mean, people need to understand we're public professionals. People approach us all the time to ask questions or, seek advice, seek opinions. To interact with the parents, especially if they're there at the facility, you need to make sure that you are interacting with the parents. Because we have to kind of put their mind at ease just as much as the 12-year-olds that things are going to be okay. This is what's going to take place. This is the process of what's happening. So you have to have some sort of dialogue with the parents, because as public professionals, it's our job to let them know that the process is going to be okay, that their child's going to be okay, to have that kind of reassurance there. For the parents, if they want to ask for advice or ask for opinions on how to do things different, there's no harm or no foul into giving that. But ultimately, they need to understand that it's exactly that. It's just your opinion. It does reflect that of the agency. And ultimately, the advice the advice or the opinion that you offer is going to be the one that they have to take. For a parent to come up to me and say, "Hey, my kid is out of control. What can I do?" Because I have parents that come up all the time that want to bring their 8, 9, 10-year-olds to a scare straight style program, which we don't really have here, due to the age and all that. But to offer advice as to maybe change the routine. Don't let them assume the same routine over and over. Change your routine up. Make them do something different. Make them, get something to get them out of. It's just like adults. Well, when we do something long enough, we get ourselves into a rut, and in order to change that, we need to get ourselves out of that routine. So it's not a bad thing to communicate with the parents. It's not a bad thing to communicate with the 12-year-old, but you ultimately have to remember that the advice that you give must be of your own and not a reflection of the agency. And it doesn't deduct points from your professionalism to put yourself on that level with those parents for a brief few minutes, because ultimately they want to know that we're human as well. They want the reassurance that their child's going to be okay. They want the reassurance that, they may be or maybe not going in the right direction. So, it doesn't hurt to have that initial communication with parents and to be professional about it.
Yeah, I'm going to say something too, guys. For those that may feel, again, you're going too far, think about this. If your child was going through the system, there'd be a lot of questions you want to know. And I don't think you have to pull out your badge for a favor to get those questions answered. I think that's something that we may have to do just within our prescribed role. It's like, oh, well, my son got locked up and no one's talking to me. Well, let me go ahead and use my badge and see if I can find out things about my son. And it shouldn't be that way. If we should, within our role, allow for some level of engagement, at least something that alleviates some of the ambiguity of the process. That's the key. And it shouldn't be the fact that I have a badge that lifts that, because trust and believe, the courtesy that you're not given will be the courtesy that you may want if your child was locked up, or a friend of your child that was locked up, because they're going to call you too. Hey, Joe, you work in the system. Can you find out what's going on? Because no one's talking to me. Sure, I'll find out. Well, why do they got to go to you? Why can't they find out on their own? I'm not being rude, but that's on us, I think. Now, I want to add one more thing. Now, yes, this is a younger child, and you drew from the fact that you're a mother, and I get that there's a connection there. But there's two things that you got to be wary of in this profession that you don't want to, one, definitely have manipulated, or two, be the one that actually puts the burden on you, which I believe is responsibility and empathy. I think that if you don't create boundaries with those two terms, responsibility and empathy, you're going to make it a very hard career. Now, the funny thing is, I think sometimes it's very easy to put those boundaries on an inmate and let the inmate know that they're not going to come past those two lines. But sometimes it's harder for us to put those boundaries on ourselves. So if I see a kid coming in and the first thing I feel is, okay, well, I'm a father of a young kid, and oh my God, I don't want this to, happen to me. So, maybe I could do a little more. Be careful. Be careful with that, because in this role, you're not the father of that kid. You are the correctional professional. And that role is the role that's the primary role. So with that said, the concern here is, I guess, when you get to work, what is your primary role? I know that roles tend to bleed in, but there's always the primary role that things have to be filtered through. It's okay to be objectively empathetic and understand what it's like to be a parent who has a child being locked up. And that may, it help you motivate an engagement that's professional with the family, because you yourself empathetically can picture, you being the parent, but it's still filtered through your role as a professional, which allows the boundary to be established. But if you do it the other way, where you're the parent and you're filtering your role as a correctional professional through being a parent, now that's a problem. Now you're going to take on the responsibility. You're going to be overly whelmed with just empathy, technically, in wanting to help the person, or actually wanting to save the individual. That's the key. And that's something where you have to be mindful of, especially when dealing with something that you can strongly relate to. So I would say in this case here, you being a mother gives you a strong relationship to the kids that may come in. Somehow you identify with it a bit more. So I think you may have to be able to kind of check yourself on that objectively, and then be able to revisit it, because you're not going to be able to change the situation that you're going to have to face, but you can change yourself in how you react to it. Does that make sense, Joe? There's a lot there, but
Yeah, I mean, it makes absolutely sense. There's nothing wrong, and I've seen it, years and years over, where females have taken on somewhat of a motherly authoritative figure, in a structure wise, while confined in a correctional facility. There's nothing wrong with adapting to somewhat of a mother figure, as long as it's structural wise, within the confines of your job role, boundaries, they're, helping them abide by rules and procedures and stuff like that, but don't let it get to the point where, you try to step in as the mother of that child, because again, you're not going to change the outcome. You're not going to change the process. You're not going to change the reason why he's there. All you can do is help him gain some structure while he's there, in adapting to rules, policies, things that he needs to follow, things that he needs to do. There's that it's perfectly okay, but don't get yourself so personally invested that you're losing sleep over this kid at night, because he's 12 years old, because you think he doesn't have a parent in his life. It's not our job to be their parents while they're there. It's our job to be their guiding authoritative figure, to help them get through the process, to help them understand the process. Like I said, I've seen it time and time over where, females have adapted that motherly figure, even to adult men in in the Department of Corrections. And they've used that role well, because, most of these guys never had any structure in their lives, never had somebody who treated them in that role. And, it helped them gain, kind of respect for them for following rules, for doing menial things. But to think that, you're actually just going to go in and save this kid. No, unfortunately, he's there for a reason. And, when it's said and done, at the end of the day, we still have to do our jobs. And, 12-year-old or not, he's still a detainee.
Yeah, I think the big part of this discussion is when you start thinking of it on your personal time, especially if it's something that you cannot resolve. That's not something you can resolve. And at one point, you have to just be okay with the effort as prescribed by your defined role as a professional, not an exhausted effort as you as a person, you as a mother, but rather the exhausted effort of being the professional that you are. That's the key. And again, as we come to a close here, I just want to make sure people know that, because there is the other side to the coin. That's why a discussion like this is needed. That's why me and Joe wanted to jump on it, is you are going to have these interactions nowadays. So I don't think the person is weak for trying to figure out where the boundary is in those dialogues, because some people may be quick to say, don't even have to have those dialogues. I disagree, because, and just even on the management perspective, if you're not having the dialogue there, I'll guarantee you the dialogue is going to be getting pushed up eventually, and it's like, well, that was something simple that could have been handled all the way down there. Why are we not answering those questions down there? Well, I just didn't want to get involved. No, you're paid to get involved. Just you got to know where those boundaries are. That's why I wrote the books on manipulation, because I know that we have involvement. This universal precaution where people translate it to we don't get involved and we don't interact. No, that's not the case, because if that was the case and we didn't have to say a damn thing, I wouldn't write these books. The books are there to navigate the interactions. It's to know that we have to have interactions, but to be wary of how far those interactions can go. And I like what she said, because if you think the way she structured her message was, she structured what her concern was, and then she was quick to say how she gave the books out because of my manipulation books out to her staff, because I think we're so afraid to admit that we could have positive interactions that we're quick to say, but I'm not being manipulated. I've had people tell me, hey, if I say, hey, you're getting ready to retire, what's the thing you remember? And sometimes officers, their biggest connection could be with an inmate to some extent, because that's where they have the greatest influence. And then they'll be quick to give you this great story. And then they'll as soon as the story's done, they'll be quick to say, but be advised, we didn't break any rules. Hey, no one said all that. Don't minimize the impact. And I think a lot of people are so afraid to make an impact because they don't want to be judged, that we're missing out on a lot of positive exchanges that could be happening. So granted, I love dialogues like this, because even though there's a concern of the emotional boundary, I get it. I get 100% how she feels, but the courage it takes to bring it up when you could be working around people that just tell you, that just kind of say, no interaction, no interaction, no interaction. You're going to get manipulated. You're going to get manipulated. And it's like, no, you just got to control it. And this may sound a little scary. But the reason why I was able to write what I write, and the reason why me and Joe and Russ are able to have these discussions, because as long as you got support, because you need support, and you got good mentors and role models out there, every interaction could be a trial and error. That's why you have people that are watching you. That's why this young lady knew to write to us, because, she's like, well, am I going too far? Am I not going too far? And, and it's not an easy dynamic for some people to think that it's easy. It's always because they're cutting off one side. It's true. They're either cutting off the intent to communicate, because you got to communicate, or they're too soft. And it's in the middle, and you always need guidance when you're in the middle, because it's not an easy solution to be in the middle. And as I said, it's not about saving or not saving, but rather, where the help is. The help is something you have to do. The outcome is in either saving or not saving. That's not up to you. So you got to get rid of that. But I think that it's good to have these dialogues, because these dialogues allow me and Joe, or me and Russ, or all of us as a partner, to express that you're going to have these interactions. It's what we've evolved into. And when the whole correction setting is, yes, it's founded in safety and security in an effort to rehabilitate. Let's not forget that latter part. Safety and security being the primary function, of course, but what's it for? In an effort to rehabilitate, you're going to have interaction, So now you have to ask yourself, how much of that interaction can affect you? And I think that's where we're at now. And I think that's where dialogue like this matters, because dialogue like this allows the people in the custodial staff to realize, hey, you don't need permission to create a positive impact. So go ahead and do it. But with that said, you also got to understand that when you open that door, you are going to be somewhat vulnerable. So now the universal precaution comes in. How do I make sure that the interactions are defined by my prescribed role and not by a role that could be manipulated, like a father figure, a mother figure, a brother figure, a sports fan, whatever it is. So my advice to that would be, remember what your primary role is at all times, and that's your filter. That's your filter. Hey, Joe, anything you'd like to say in closing? It's a good dialogue. It literally does embrace where we're headed in the years to come.
Yeah. I mean, number one, our job purpose, no matter if it's a county jail, if it's a juvenile facility, if it's a Department of Corrections, is to provide public safety, promote positive change in offender behavior, reintegrate the offender back into society, and assist the victims of crime. With that said, I want to say something directly to this officer is, don't lose your drive. We need 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 more officers like you that who find purpose in what they do. who have the ambition for the drive. You know, it's not a bad thing to want to leave a positive impact on somebody, but the main thing is don't lose yourself and don't lose your role of authority while you're doing it. You know, we're going to leave some sort of impact on somebody in our careers. I've had inmates that walked up to me 10, 15 years after they paroled or discharged and shake my hand and say, you know, Lieutenant, I just want to say thank you for being stern with me, for being a hard ass on me, because, you know, you told me that you seen something in me that I didn't see in myself. And now I have a family, a successful career, house. I have all these things that I didn't have when I was running the streets. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, you're going to leave some sort of impact on somebody, whether you know it or not. They're going to recognize you years from now. They're going to want to come up and shake your hand and say thank you. There's nothing wrong with leaving a positive impact on somebody or helping them promote a positive impact for themselves. But don't lose your authoritative role, your prescribed role, while you're doing it. There's going to be some things that you can change while he's there, and there's going to be there's going to be things that you can't change. But it doesn't hurt to have the interaction with the juvenile. It doesn't hurt to have the interaction with the parents. You know, I have them almost every day. You know, calling up. You know, people calling up and checking on their loved ones in prison. Or in our jail. So it's not going to hurt to want to leave that positive impact, but just don't lose yourself in the process. Don't think that you can change the outcome of the reason why he's there, because you're not. All you can do is give him the guidance and the structure while he's there. All you can do is really give the parents reassurance that the child is going to be safe, and that he's going to be okay. And, you know, he's going to get through the process one way or the other. But like I said, you know, there's nothing wrong with being, you know, invested in what you do. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But don't.
Oh, sorry. Then I'll continue. I thought you. Okay, please.
No, I was just going to say, just make sure you don't invest yourself to the point where you cross the boundary from you know, correctional officer, jailer, or whatever, you know, your title is, to full-fledged mother authority, because you're not going to change his impacts at home. You're not going to change his you know, his home life. All you can do is try to give him some positive aspects to change while he's there.
Yeah, I want to say something. This is why you're on the channel, Joe. This is why you are on the channel, because that is spot on advice. I mean, it's not just advice for just her, but advice for where we're going in this profession, because it allows the dialogue in a very controlled fashion. I had mentioned before that, you know, you got to be wary, and this is my closing thoughts, that, you know, one is this is a purpose-driven profession. So I'm not going to sit there and tell you that you're not going to have a positive interaction. You're supposed to. That's your job. That's what keeps you motivated through these tough times. You got to look for some positive amongst the negative. But with that said, again, you don't want your efforts to save, because you're not in control of that. That's the outcome, to erode your want to help. That's the key, you know, and Joe mentioned that so perfectly. What I would do if I was you is I would screenshot Joe's closing message. I really would, because it's a very short but powerful thing, and I would play that to myself before I go to work every day. It's kind of as a reminder of where you need to be. I mean, at my job, we actually have a mirror. And right before people go in, they look in the mirror to kind of see how the world will see them that day. Kind of puts them in the right mindset. I think this right here puts you in what Joe said at the end, kind of wrapped up the whole dialogue. I literally, if I was going through this, I believe a lot of people are, and they don't admit it because of the vulnerability, or they're afraid that they'll be judged by their peers, that they're getting too close, when it's like, hey guys, it's just the boundary. We got to create boundaries. So the person is not getting too close. They're asking what the boundary is. That's what it is. But now your question isn't of curiosity, it's of judgment. So now the person doesn't want to ask you anymore. So now they just, you know, forget it, and they wind up going the wrong way. I think this is where we definitely need to come in and say, hey, I get what you're doing, but let's try it this way, and let's start controlling those boundaries. And you know, what Joe said perfectly fits. I mean, literally, that could have just been the show right there, and we could have just stopped it. So again, my closing thoughts, take Joe's remark, the closing statements, the last 3 minutes of the show, screen record it, and really connect to it each time before you go to work. Because one, it kind of gives you the outline, but two, it shows you that you're headed in the right direction. Just need a little bit of guidance, because sometimes people's judgment can make us feel we're doing this all wrong. But we didn't say that once. We actually think you're headed in the right direction, but got to kind of pull it back a bit. That was phenomenal, Joe. As always, guys, the show is tiered up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.